to the Officially Denied podcast. I'm Toby.
And I'm Peter.
So, to kick things off this week, we asked you on Instagram if there was any stories you want us to cover. And Iñaki Mordon, great guy, I know him personally, suggested that we talk about the changes in the Snoopers Charter that have come up this week. So we will be doing just that. So thank you very much, Iñaki, for the suggestion.
So, Toby, would you care then to run us through the kind of the background and the context with regards to this?
Yes. So the Snoopers Charter was passed a couple years ago, and it essentially created one of the biggest surveillance states in the world within the UK. It's quite funny because people were joking about this, saying that Parliament should have taken 1984 as a warning instead of a rule book, but they did the latter. Because among the many things that this charter allowed them to do, one of them is having access to your internet history for a whole year. So everything you Google today will be saved if you live in the UK, not anywhere in the world, of course. If you live in the UK, anything you look up on Google today will be saved by your internet provider, and any higher power has access to it for the next year. But as we all know, unofficially, they're probably saving it for longer. The law was called the Data Retention and Investigatory Powers Act of 2014. DREPA is the acronym. And DREPA was found that it was inconsistent with EU law, seeing as EU law said that the access to data was restricted solely to fighting serious crime. So this legal case was started in 2014 by Labour's deputy leader Tom Watson and David Davis, government's Brexit chief. Since then, Davis has stepped down, but Tom Watson has kept this going. And in 2015, the High Court here in the UK ruled that DREPA's email and communication interventions weren't compatible with EU law. So the European Court of Justice was then called to run through this. So it's been a long-standing battle for a couple of years. However, in November of 2017, the government, so our government, said that it was granting more concessions for privacy. And they said, okay, we'll step back and we will only access people's data for serious crimes, but we won't collect data for issues of public health or tax collection. Of course, that's what they say. And if you get your tinfoil hat on, maybe they'll be collecting it for anything else. So, Snoopers Charter, bottom line is your whole online activity is stored for 12 months and the government has access to it. So how do you feel about this happening in our country?
Well, I mean, the view I think I take with regards to kind of surveillance by the government of people's online activity, I actually kind of think that, I mean, clearly there needs to be something there in place because, you know, we live in a dangerous world. There is a lot of terrorist activity that happens online, a lot of organized crime that would otherwise be allowed to roam free on the internet to organize their activity. So clearly there has to be some ability by the government to look into this stuff. The question, of course, comes to how exactly do you legislate on that and how do you protect people's privacy? Now, the view I take is actually people's online property, let's just say, should be viewed in actually the same way as your property in the real world. I think if we are, and this is the line a lot of the UK government and a lot of these other governments that have done similar legislation have said is, you know, if we can't let terrorists and other sinister interests operate online because we don't let them operate in the real world. And I mean, again, the view I take is, okay, fine, then let's treat your stuff like your browsing history in the same way we treat your real life property, which is that generally, stay out of my shit. If you have a good reason to come in and search my house, search my property, search my online browsing history, then get a proper warrant from a judge, which will obviously require a very good reason. The problem with the Snoopers Charter is they don't have these kind of safeguards in place. There is only one person, I think, in these cases that has to sign off for that surveillance to be allowed on a particular individual, and that someone isn't a judge. He is just someone that's appointed by the government to do this. So, of course, you run into the problem of the government appoints X individual to basically allow them to do surveillance on people whenever they want it, because, again, it's not an independent authority.
Exactly, and quite literally real-time surveillance. I mean, they could... The whole meme going around now of the little FBI agent that lives in everybody's webcam is actually a reality in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, there's... of course, we can make jokes about, Orwell and some crazy surveillance state and, everyone covering up their webcams and whatever. But at the end of the day, this is, about basic liberties, which I think we, as we would like to think ourselves as citizens in a free country, think we should have. But what do you think, Toby? How do you think governments, not just the UK government, but in generally, of course, with the US, this has been a much more high-profile debate with Edward Snowden and the NSA leaks. How do you think governments should generally address this issue?
Well, as you said, treating digital property like physical property, requiring warrants to search for it, is a very, very positive way to look at this. It's a very human way of treating our digital data, our digital belongings. And of course, there's a right to privacy. There's a right to privacy that governments are challenging or trying to challenge. And I've heard people say, well, I don't mind the government having access to my digital data. I have nothing to hide. But having nothing to hide doesn't mean you don't have a right to not show what you have.
The argument, of course, is that I have nothing to hide, therefore you have no reason to look. There was actually a Conservative MP when the Snoopers Charter debate was happening for the last... Well, when it was right before it was officially signed off by the House of Commons. There was a Conservative MP who, in a parliamentary debate on this, stated that if you've got nothing to hide, then you've got nothing to fear. Little did he know, of course, that the person who originally coined that phrase was none other than Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi Reich Marshal for propaganda and people's enlightenment. So clearly, this is not someone in whose footsteps we should be following and from who we should be borrowing our logic, I guess, for this kind of legislation.
It's a fine line. I understand that the digital dimension of our lives, because it's quite literally another dimension that we live in, is still a Wild West. I mean, there's crazy trends that come and go from a business perspective. Currently, the Wild West for making money is the bubble that is cryptocurrency.
Yep.
And among this Wild West that is the digital landscape is also our right to privacy is quite clear. So, yes, there's a fine line to tread, but I agree with you, Peter, in the fact that we do need to treat our digital data as if it was physical belongings.
And, I am personally surprised that there isn't a bigger uproar, at least in the UK, about this, because, guys, we are talking about your internet browsing history. This is something that is famously sensitive among everyone. And, you wouldn't... This is not something that you would just make public online, right? So why do you trust some unnamed bureaucrats in your government to access it, essentially whenever they want, without any reasonable justification? Which, of course, is the very fundamental basis for our Western legal system. You have the right to be viewed innocent before being proven guilty, right?
Exactly. It's people are very complacent about this, and the fact that it's still kind of under the radar and not many people are freaking the fuck out about it really worries me.
And I think...
See, last week we spoke about protesting Trump coming to the UK. And in that case, I'd tell someone, well, it's up to you to protest whether or not you believe Trump should come to the UK. But when it comes to digital data, people should really be getting up and protesting, because this is something that does affect you personally.
And I think it's also unhelpful to treat this issue as kind of this... I guess as a kind of meme around, people looking at you jerking off, or people having access to all the obscure porn sites that you visit. I mean, at the end of the day, this is really about much more serious issues. It is about, just to name one example, do you want, again, some faraway, unnamed bureaucrat or civil servant or whatever to be able to access, I don't know, let's say your NHS mental health history, right?
Exactly. Or for example, the access to your data when it comes to medical issues, as you said, mental history, could then be used by insurance companies to raise or lower the price of insurance for certain people, depending on the data collected online.
Of course, we're not at a point where, of course, this information is publicly available. But, you are right, it does raise those kind of questions.
Oh, it does raise those questions. But more so, if there is a backdoor to your data that the government can use, anyone can use it. Anyone with the right skills, the right hacking skills, quite literally, can gain access to all the data that the government can access.
I think, though, that is a bit of a different question. Again, I think both you and I agree that there should be some infrastructure in place for the security services to have access to the stuff when it is genuinely an issue of national security, say.
Indeed, yes. If it's an issue of national security, do what you have to with the right permissions. Otherwise, stay out of people's shit.
Yeah, I think I'll just repeat what I said earlier. I think your digital life should be treated the same as your, I guess, real world life, shall we put it this way? If the state really deems it necessary to have access to your private stuff, get a warrant. I don't know what else to say. Get a warrant. So, Toby, here comes the sad moment when we have to talk about Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Good grief.
So you are, of course, aware of the events that happened at the University of West England in Bristol, I believe, on Friday of last week.
I did read about it. You did share an article with me, but would you care to explain what happened? So
to provide some context, Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, you should know who he is, but the famous conservative backbencher, member of parliament for the 19th century, was invited to speak by the Politics Society at the University of West England. And just before he was about to give a speech, a group of individuals, a relatively small group, about 10 people or so, burst into the room wearing sunglasses and black ski masks and started shouting, protest slogans at Mogg. Jacob Rees-Mogg then calmly walks towards them and tries to initiate a sensible, calm discussion, because that's what he does, of course. And tensions go high. Some of his supporters approach the protesters. There's a bit of a tussle. One of Mogg's supporters, I guess, whether intentionally or not, elbows a woman who is one of the protesters. A small fight breaks out with Mogg in the middle of this. And for about 2 days or so afterwards, this, of course, became a big media kind of conversation because for some reason university culture or university politics is now a big discussion among especially right-wing press. And this kind of became part of that discussion about protesting speakers and so forth. Now, here's what really annoys and angers me genuinely about this whole fiasco. I get it. You don't like Jacob Rees-Mogg. Jacob Rees-Mogg has some very questionable views. You don't like Jacob Rees-Mogg? I don't like Jacob Rees-Mogg. We are basically on the same side. But here's the thing. There comes a moment, I think, in politics where you have to stop thinking about your feelings and start thinking about tactics. And, from one student to another, if any of those people who broke into his speech are somehow listening to this, from one student to another, let me tell you this. If you want to protest a speaker at your university campus, tip number 1, don't wear a fucking balaclava, you moron.
Yeah. If somebody's going to stand up and challenge someone's political views, at least don't cover your face up.
Well, I mean, again, I am approaching this, I guess, from a more cynical kind of a point of view of genuinely of how do you think this is going to look in the media? Again, at a time when university free speech and protesting controversial speakers at university campuses is, whether we like it or not, a big media issue. I think one thing that is very obvious from that whole encounter there that happened, the only person who came off positively from that entire thing was Jacob Rees-Mogg, who calmly stood in the middle of that fracas and tried to, I guess, negotiate a peaceful solution. And then the Daily Mail can run articles for several days going on about how liberals are ruining universities and ultra-PC culture is a threat to free speech in society. And the thing is, like, I accept that in America this is a somewhat different conversation, but campus censorship is not really a problem in the United Kingdom. It is such a microscopic issue, but it is an issue which the political right loves, because they feel very comfortable there. And what you are doing, if you start acting like an idiot at one of these events, you are basically giving the Daily Mail and the right-wing side of their stupid culture war a free hand to slam you in the media for several days, and nobody is going to look at you positively. Again, if you want to protest a speaker, by all means do it. If someone like Katie Hopkins came to my university campus and there was a lot of protesters, yeah, there should be. But don't cover your face. Don't wear balaclavas. Don't, I don't think this should be any kind of controversial statement, right? To say that if you want to protest a speaker at your university, don't look like you're some kind of thug smashing a high street window. Because no matter what happened, and I totally sympathize with some people on the left, especially members of Momentum who have been tied to these people. I don't know. I mean, apparently one of them was a Momentum member, but honestly, I don't think this was in any way a Momentum affiliated action, because that's really not what Momentum does. I disagree with them on a lot of issues, but look, I mean, I sympathize with a lot of people on the left who feel that the media has portrayed this in an unfair way, especially in essentially making it seem that those protesters were the source of all the violence that ensued there, which they were not. Again, as I said, if you actually look through the footage, the altercation was, whether intentionally or not, started by one of the people in the audience. One of the Jacob Rees-Mogg supporters engaged in that scuffle turns out likes to dress up as an SS officer at some parties he goes to, which, we can all play the game of trying to smear the other side. And if you are on the left and you feel that your side has been unfairly represented here, you are totally right to feel that. The problem is, once you go into that event and you look like that and you act like that, it doesn't matter what happens. You are already going to be portrayed in a negative light.
I see what you mean. Basically, these people took a political action. Political action is all about debate, all about listening to what somebody else has to say, and in turn, having your voice heard. That's why politics exists. The second you throw a stone, you throw a punch, you pull a gun, you pull a knife. Basically, any action that is a physical threat is apolitical. That's why so many...
Or at least it's not part of what we would consider to be acceptable political discourse, right?
Oh, not at all. Of course. MLK condemned riots. He explained how they were not the way to get your point across, despite saying that it was the last resort people used and it was the language of the unheard. But of course, we're talking about that was in 1968. Right now we are in 2018. Good grief. We're currently in 2018, where you do have a platform for your voice. You can stand up and speak about what you feel is right, what you feel is wrong, and how it should be changed.
Yeah.
So interrupting a speaker, no matter how controversial he may be, to shout at him with your face covered and unfortunately ending up in a physical confrontation, you're just going to look like the enemy in this situation.
I mean, yeah, just by your own actions, you will end up looking like the bad guy. And again, I totally sympathize with people who want to protest Jacob Rees-Mogg. If Jacob Rees-Mogg comes to your university campus and you want to peacefully protest him, that is entirely within your right.
But there was a key word, peacefully.
Yeah, and I totally, endorse that action if you want to take it. Jacob Rees-Mogg is scheduled to come to the University of Birmingham here in a few weeks. I don't think I'll be protesting him, because I kind of just want to sit in the audience and enjoy what silly stuff he has to say. But, I mean, the point remains is that if you do want to protest these people, just think about how you act, and think about how it will come off. Because again, if it's someone who is a high-profile figure, like Jacob Rees-Mogg is, there will inevitably be journalists there, there will inevitably be people filming that event there. And if you look like a thug, you are only doing the work of the political right and of the right-wing side of, the culture war, and you are doing the work of the Daily Mail and of Breitbart entirely for them. They want to make it seem that universities are full of raging Antifa protesters who are smashing up windows and censoring every single speaker, even with a vaguely right-wing view, which of course is utter nonsense. As I said, this is relatively such a small issue in UK universities, and if you go in there acting like that, the only thing you will accomplish is to making your entire side look bad.
Exactly. Play stupid games, earn stupid prizes. Don't make an arse of yourself in a political protest, because you're just feeding into the hands of your opponents.
Yeah, I mean, on a final note, I would just like to say, I totally, for the millionth time, I totally respect people's right to protest. We talked about Trump coming to the UK on I think the podcast last week or the week before, and I mean, personally, the main reason I actually do want, or the only reason I actually want Trump to come to the UK is because the protests will be amazing, and I will take the train down to London, and I will hold a placard there saying wanker or something of the sort. So no, I totally understand. But, just think about tactics, and think about how it is going to come off in the mainstream light.
Right. So, I'm a big fan of Elon Musk. Yes, he does have his negative aspects. He is known to be a bit of a madman when it comes to how he runs his companies. He does have a ruthless system in place, and I understand that, but we're talking about the US here, where ruthless leaders with a strict work routine get shit done. And the shit that's getting done this week by SpaceX is the launch of the Falcon Heavy.
And would you like to briefly tell us about what that exactly is?
Yes, of course. I'm very excited about this. So SpaceX have been making the headlines for a couple of years now, where they had the Falcon 9 rocket that was very special because it could launch vertically, as every rocket does, but it would land vertically, allowing it to conserve some fuel sometimes, depending on how the trajectory was planned out. But most importantly, a whole rocket. They could reuse a whole booster and a whole fuel containment unit. So SpaceX know what they're doing. However, the ultimate mission is to reach Mars. And to do this, we're going to need a bigger rocket, simply enough. And the bigger rocket in question being launched this week is the Falcon Heavy. And to give you an idea, Falcon Heavy has 3 huge boosters. And it is the most powerful rocket to be launched since the Saturn V. And the Saturn V was the rocket used to launch astronauts to the moon. So that's a hell of a lot of explosive power. But it even gets crazier. And I didn't tell you this earlier, Peter. You said you had no idea about it. But the test...
For the record, most of my knowledge of Elon Musk is that he's a crazy guy on Twitter who sells flamethrowers.
That does seem to be his current side hustle, but he'll be back on the good stuff. So the payloads launched by SpaceX, sometimes they were dummy payloads. They've also done resupplies to the International Space Station in collaboration with NASA. Very impressive for a private space company. However, the payload for tomorrow, which thankfully a couple of hours ago was approved by the US government for some stupid reason, is a Tesla Roadster. So the top of the rocket will have a prototype of Tesla's new car that has yet to be released, the Tesla Roadster, with a spacesuit in the driver's seat nicknamed Starman.
Wait, hold on. Just so we're being clear, the rocket in question will have a Tesla car in it with a dummy in a space costume.
Yep, and that dummy will be driving that Tesla Roadster into space.
Why?
Once it's detached from the body.
I'm guessing that's just a PR thing, right? I don't think there's any practical reasons for why anyone would want to do this.
Well, practical reasons. I'll get the serious stuff done first.
Unless we're trying to educate the Martians in clean transportation, but
that might be helpful. But no, the practical use, of course, could be fitting the dummy with sensors and then putting a stress test on the spacesuit, seeing as this spacesuit is designed by SpaceX, and the idea is that this suit will be used for space exploration by astronauts in the future. But the crazy part of it, and it is crazy, but it's also the reality, is that Elon Musk is essentially just a child at play here. Keep in mind, this guy is one nuclear disaster away from becoming a supervillain.
I mean,
he is a multimillionaire.
Billionaire.
He's buff as shit. I mean, billionaire. Yeah, he's a billionaire. He's buff as shit. I mean, Jeff Bezos is also on that gains train, so they're both might wrestle each other to the death one day. Who knows?
I would pay to see that one.
He rides around in electric supercars because he owns it. He runs all his stuff off solar power, so self-sufficient. He owns a rocket company, so he gets to launch rockets all the time, and now is launching a car into space.
I mean, the thing about Elon Musk, and quickly, I think you're talking about supervillains. The thing he actually reminds me of the most, I think, is Mr. House from the video game Fallout New Vegas.
Mr. House.
As this kind of slightly nutty genius inventor who might also become a dictator at some point, and who is really into space exploration. But, the thing about Elon Musk, really, I kind of joked before that I only thought he was a guy selling flamethrowers, but really, his main business is not all the crazy stuff you hear about. He basically makes mining equipment, or his company does. The Boring Company.
Yeah, so the Boring Company is his current profitable company that,
Yeah.
to be fair, was only launched, what, 2-3 years ago?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned earlier, Tesla is definitely not making a profit, and it is not making a profit anytime soon. It's just a...
Oh no.
It is just
Tesla's playing the Silicon Valley game of innovate now, make a profit later, as is happening with Spotify. People kind of don't know why Spotify's still running. And it's because investors keep pumping money into it because one day it will be a profitable company.
Right, and I mean, Elon Musk, of course, the reason he is so prominent is precisely because he is so amazing at this, as a salesman. He is a brilliant salesman. He travels around the world, he meets world leaders, he sells them on these amazing kind of projects. I think my favorite recent example was he went to Turkey to have a meeting with Erdogan. And Erdogan, of course, being Erdogan, gave Elon Musk a present, which was a picture of Erdogan.
Beautiful.
But the point being that he is someone who, as you say, the whole Tesla thing is essentially playing the long game, and I guess driving general interest to all the other stuff he does.
Of course, a lot of Tesla fans who weren't really aware of SpaceX or didn't follow it that much will probably be watching the launch tomorrow because, I mean, I want to see a car get launched into space. Don't know about you.
Will you be buying a boring flamethrower anytime soon?
Well, I currently don't have the $500, and I don't know how customs in the UK works when it comes to shipping flamethrowers.
Is it allowed to use your student loan money to buy a boring flamethrower?
Yes.
I mean,
it might have uses.
I mean, think about it. You can have food for a month, or you can have a flamethrower. The latter is clearly more fun.
Well, I mean, yeah. Starve yourself and get a flamethrower. That just seems a logical path.
I mean, the first one was baseball caps, now it's flamethrowers. I am dreading to think of what this guy starts selling on the internet next. So, Toby, you recently got back from the cinema. I
did.
Would you care to give us your impressions on Den of Thieves?
Yes,
I hear you loved it a lot.
Yeah, Den of Thieves was fantastic. 10 out of 10, deserves all the Oscars. But I'm going to be serious right now. It was fucking god-awful. It was just, honestly, where do I begin with this one? There was just so much wrong with it. So, it was bad, but it wasn't bad in the room kind of way, where it's so bad that it's actually kind of amazing. No, it was just so boring and uninspired that I just don't know where to start with this. There's just so many things wrong with it.
Well, I guess go down the list. What even is this film, for those who aren't even aware? Because I don't think I'm even sure.
So Den of Thieves has been marketed as a cops and robbers film where the cops seem to be just as bad as the robbers because they're all tough and buff and manly. And it's starring Jared Butler and 50 Cent and O'Shea Jackson Jr., a.k.a. Ice Cube's son, among other actors. It also has Max Holloway, who's a UFC fighter, for any of you who enjoy MMA. He only has 30 seconds of total screen time. And also at the end, Michael Bisping, who is from Manchester and a UFC fighter, also appears in the film for some bloody reason and is only in it for about 20 seconds, which is dumb. So why do they even market that? Anyway, Christian Gudegast is the director and writer, and to be honest, he should not write another fucking film again in his life, because he managed to make Jared Butler boring. The film is set in LA. The color scheme for the film is the gritty color scheme that you get in every single film nowadays, which is basically shit brown, depression and grey, and moonlight blue, even though it's plain daylight. You know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The battlefield syndrome. Anyway.
Right.
The plot is a huge mess. it's got these cops and robbers where these robbers are very successful robbing banks and they want to hit the one bank which is impossible to rob, and they've been building themselves up. And the cops are these kind of, they're sheriffs and they're the hunters, if that makes any sense. They're muscly, they've got a huge arsenal of weapons, they're angry, and they're chasing down these criminals. But the film does this thing where it keeps jumping back and forth between characters narrating what another character did in the past, which is really confusing. But then the plot lines for each character, none of them, you really don't care enough for any of the characters. I'll go down the list as it says on IMDb. So Gerard Butler is the head of this sheriff unit, and he's just boring. He's always chewing something, which is bloody annoying. So he's either chewing something or smoking.
What would he be chewing?
Either a donut at the beginning, or then he just walks into someone's party and starts eating something.
Because he's a cop, right?
Oh yeah, it's also very stereotypically American. I'll get into that afterwards. They try to fit in this whole story of his wife divorcing him because he smelled like strippers, which is a very valid reason, but they still tried to fit that all in, and it was just so dumb. It just added nothing to the film. It was an attempt to make you care for him, but you really don't. Then you have Pablo Schreiber, who is an absolutely fantastic actor as well. He played, I can't remember the name of his character right now, but he was in American Gods and he was absolutely brilliant. And in this film, he sucked. Then we have 50 Cent, who is 50 Cent. I mean, hardened criminal, badass, who I swear to God I couldn't understand a single word of what he said. He just mumbled all his lines. And then O'Shea Jackson Jr., which despite the bad writing was actually very likable. He's Ice Cube's son, and he's very, very charismatic, so I quite liked him a lot. He was also in another film which I thought was mediocre, Ingrid Goes West, but he was also the best part of that film. But it's so stereotypically American. It's, of course, the American cops are, they're corrupt and they have a great moral compass. But then Gerard Butler, after his wife divorces him, he goes to a strip club. And after the strip club, it cuts to him going to the shooting range, followed by him going to the bar. And it just keeps pushing this whole, all the lads in this film are macho men who shoot guns and get drunk. And I swear to God, there are about 6 conversations in the film where it's one character going, fuck you, to which the other replies, no, fuck you, to which he gets a reply, fuck you, you pussy motherfucker.
I mean,
that is actually a conversation that happens in the film more than once.
To be fair, there is nothing wrong with shooting guns, or getting drunk, or saying lovely 4-letter words, but yeah, I don't think it makes the basis for a great on-screen dialogue.
No, and as for the score, I'm a big lover of film scores. If a film has a great score, it can be absolutely fantastic. And this film was silent for 60% of it in the score section. There were a lot of car chases with just no music, which could have been done well, but no, it was just really awkward. I thought this sounds like a discount Blade Runner soundtrack. And then when the credits rolled, it was Cliff Martinez, the guy who made the soundtrack for Drive, which is absolutely fantastic. So once I finished this film, I tried to pinpoint where it went wrong. It has good actors. The premise was actually quite interesting. I won't spoil the plot because maybe you'll want to go and watch it, but to be fair, you're not missing out. And I realized it comes down to 2 factors. Terrible cinematography and boring shootouts. That can happen, it's fine. The color scheme, you can get over it. You can kind of look past that if the rest of it is good. However, the writing and the editing are the Achilles heel of this film. The writing manages to make someone like Gerard Butler, who's a fantastic actor, boring. Pablo Schreiber, who's also has a lot of potential, boring. O'Shea Jackson Jr., who's charismatic, struggles to shine. And 50 Cent, who does have one absolutely hilarious scene that is the best scene in the whole film could be so much better, and he's not.
I mean, on the subject of Gerald Butler, there is a film I saw recently that came out last year, but I only saw it a few weeks ago. Are you aware of Geostorm?
Geostorm. I've not seen it.
Don't.
However, one of my mates did review it.
Well, if anybody hasn't seen Geostorm, don't. But I mean, I only bring it up since you mentioned Gerald Butler. I think, you know, if we're talking about films which somehow managed to ruin Gerald Butler, I actually think that might be the most recent example of just that.
But what about Olympus Has Fallen?
Well,
and London Has Fallen?
Here's the thing about Gerald Butler. Gerald Butler doesn't really star in many Oscar-nominated movies. I think it's fair to say that, right? He is, you know, love him or hate him, you know, he is, he stars in these kind of, you know, high-profile but kind of mid-range movies, which a lot of people enjoy, but, you know, they don't exactly win a lot of Oscar nominations. But his whole essence is that he is this, you know, angry Scotsman, right? And that's why he is funny or entertaining or whatnot. Now, in Geostorm, however, he plays this scientist, and he speaks in an American accent. Now,
he's American in this film as well.
Now, but here's the thing, though. In Geostorm, Gerald Butler speaks in an American accent, and at first when we were watching it, we thought, well, okay, this is really stupid. Why would you have Gerald Butler in your film and make him play an American with an American accent? But it is later revealed in the film that he is actually British.
What?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out. He plays he plays a British scientist with an American accent, and he's Gerald Butler.
Here's the thing, Peter. When it comes to films like this, which they're not god-awful, like The Room, it's just so bad that it's actually kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Or many other films like The Wicker Man. It's these films which, if you'd have to rate them out of 10, you wouldn't give them a 1 or a 2. You'd maybe give them a 3 or 4. Maybe even a 5, because it was like, eh. It falls into this realm of mediocrity. And people keep accepting this mediocrity in cinema. I'm going to go ahead and admit it. I'm very pretentious about film. I bitch about films a lot. That's what I do. I write film reviews for my university paper. And here I am on the podcast bitching about this film. But I don't do it to be pedantic. I actually love filmmaking as an art.
Well, you know, we are angry and passionate about the things that we love, right? That's kind of how it works, yeah.
So the fact that filmmaking is an art means that, you know, if a painting's really shit, people will look at that painting and say, that sucks. But when it comes to films, people still, once they've paid for the ticket, no matter how bad the film is, you've already given them the money. And they've made money off their terrible, I'm not going to say piece of art, because sometimes it's just not a piece of art. So this world of mediocrity within film just kind of pisses me off at how people accept terrible films. But anyway,
yeah,
I'll end my rant there. So, yes, I am pedantic about film. However, we'd like to know what films you've seen recently, whether they were fantastic, seeing as it's Oscar season, or whether they just really pissed you off. Whichever end of this rating scale you are on, send us a message. Send it on Instagram. We're at Officially Denied on Instagram. And we are now live on Facebook. So give us a like on there and make a post on our timeline telling us about what film you hated or what film you loved. We'll make sure to give some room to everyone. And of course, if you do comment, we will talk about it in the next episode. We'll give it a bit of a mention.
All right, thanks everyone for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.